Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Kate, and today's episode, we're going to be chatting all about self sabotage. Self sabotage is when you consciously or unconsciously act in ways that block your own progress, success, or well being. It often stems from fear, low self worth, or past experiences. Even if you want to succeed, your actions may contradict your intentions. It can show up in procrastination, negative self talk, perfectionism, avoidance, impulsive behavior, toxic relationships, fear of success, unhealthy coping habits, self isolation, and quitting too early. And it's interesting, as I was doing up the schedule for this podcast, or I was doing up the structure, sorry, for this podcast, there were certain things that were standing out to me that I've definitely overcame. But there's definitely ways that I'm self sabotaging now as well. And it's important just to recognize your patterns. Being self aware is really important. And that way you can get help in managing it and being able to look at your patterns and see how you can see your triggers, what triggers you to self sabotage, look at your patterns, and then get help, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through a mentor, whether it's through coaching, in whatever way you are self sabotaging, and to get help with that. So, for years, I used food as a coping mechanism and I would self sabotage through food without realizing. And I just didn't know that that was a coping mechanism for how I was dealing with a lot of things that were going on in my house at the time. And just growing up in general, like in school and just at home, and there was a lot going on, and I was using food as a way of coping, but I was self-sabotaging. So I was in like an all or nothing mindset when it came to food, and then ended up developing an eating disorder. And it was down to using that as a coping mechanism. So when you are self sabotaging, it's basically a protective mechanism. So even though sometimes it can be to your detriment, your body and brain doesn't know any different. It just thinks it's keeping you safe. And I was reading about it a lot in Brianna West's The Mountain Is You, and she chats about self sabotage a lot. And there's actually a chapter on it, and it is incredible. I would highly recommend. And basically, what she says is when you are close to success, or when you are doing something that aligns with your values and everything's going really, really well, and then all of a sudden you just throw it all out the window. Like, an example could be if you went on a dieting phase, or you went on a fat loss phase, or you went on a health and fitness journey and you did really, really well on it, and you were doing it for a couple of months and you were doing extremely well, and you had new habits and you felt better in yourself, and you were going to the gym more, you're exercising more regularly, and then you kind of just throw it all out the window. It's like it gets too good to be true, kind of thing. And you throw it all out the window and you think that you're just lazy, or there's something wrong with you, or this is just the way I am, and you go back to the old version of yourself that you're most familiar with. And you constantly will get pulled back to the old version of yourself because that's what makes you feel safe, and that's all you know, and that's what's familiar, even if that is something that isn't serving you. So let's say your previous lifestyle to that was unhealthy eating, you weren't exercising as much, you weren't taking care of yourself as much in whatever way that looked, or that's all you know, that's all you're familiar with. So that's where your body and brain feels comfortable. And actually, when you were in the higher version of yourself, which was exercising more regularly, more frequently, eating better food, more nutrient dense food, and you know, having an overall healthier lifestyle, that felt unsafe. And it's kind of like when you pull back on a string, and then it's like there's a load of resistance, and then it's like you let go and it brings you right back to the start. Or it's like if you were an analogy of climbing a mountain and you're just about to get to the peak, like you're just about to get to the top, and you just decide, no, I can't do it anymore. And then you end up being pulled or dragged back down. That's kind of what self sabotage is like. you quit too early or you give up just before it becomes your norm. And this is where Brianna West chats about living in your upper limit. So you kind of have to get more comfortable living in the discomfort of your new familiar. So your new familiar could be, for me, there was loads of different things for me, but for me, it was getting used to, when I came out the back end of my eating disorder, it was you getting used to being comfortable with eating regular meals and eating out spontaneously and, you know, fueling my body because that's what's good for it, and not being so restricted to calorie counting and being obsessive over numbers and things like that. And the only way I got good at, removing those old behaviors and those behaviors that weren't self-serving when it came to like over exercising and under eating was by slowly but surely taking small steps in the other direction that felt really uncomfortable because it wasn't familiar to me. So another way that can manifest is if you're someone who is quite poor at saving money. This was a past version of myself as well, because I was used to never having money at home. Um, like I never ever had money like growing up, and I was always so used to being at zero that that's where I felt most comfortable. So even when I started making more money from my business, I used to spend it all very impulsively, which is self-sabotage, so impulsive behavior. And I found it really difficult to save it because I was so used to being at zero, and that's what felt most comfortable to me. And it sounds crazy. It really does, because I went so long working 3 jobs, trying to build my business up in order to be more financially stable. And even when I started making more money, I still would end up being close to nothing or having nothing, because that behavior was still there of, spending everything I had when it came in, and also not being used to having money. So not really knowing what to do with it, and then impulsively spending it because I was so comfortable at zero. I just had to get really used to being more comfortable with saving money and keeping money, and holding on to it and keeping it there. And it does sound crazy, but that was the reality. So I had to get used to living in my upper limit, as Brianna West calls it, of like this higher version of yourself. It feels more uncomfortable to live there, but you have to just get used to sitting in that discomfort of being okay with maybe having more money, or being okay with being less rigid around your training and nutrition. It's all context matters, because for someone else it could be the fact that they never ever spend money. They have this fear of, it all going, and they never ever spend it, and they have this fear that it's all going to go away, fear of failure, and they hold on to it. For another person it could be, the fear of losing an old identity. So if they're maybe struggling to lose body fat, or they're overweight, and they've been seen as that person for a long period of time that doesn't go to the gym, that's overweight, who, isn't that type of person to go to the gym or to eat healthy, it actually may be really difficult for that person to engage in behaviors that consist of being healthier by going to the gym, going out for walks, getting in regular meals, because their identity is based around what maybe others expect of them, and also what they've told themselves as well. So easy to use negative self talk as something to hide behind, to not do something. For example, I am not a good podcaster. I haven't done it. I have done it for quite a long time, but I still need to practice it a lot to get into the 1%. And if that's something that I really, really want to do, I just have to keep doing it, and I still find it quite hard. I stutter a lot. I go over my words a lot. I find it difficult to prepare for these things. And that's also a form of self sabotage, not being prepared, because you're just like, oh, well, I'm not prepared, so I'm never going to be ready. And I may as well not do it at all. So for me, I have to just push through regardless. And I think as well, it's just being okay with knowing that this is enough on your day, or in your day to day. So, like, what is my capacity to give to today, and how can I show up in the best as the best part of myself today. And sometimes it's going to look like 10% or 20%, but that was the best you could give on that given day. And I've started to be way more forgiving to myself and be way more compassionate to myself and know that something is better than nothing, and I'm trying my best, and that's all I can expect of myself. So even though sometimes I'll still engage in self-sabotaging behaviors where I won't ask for help, or I, will try to do it all by myself, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor at times, this hyper independence that I can do it all and I'm fine on my own. And I know, and I'm aware of that. You know what I mean? I have gotten help since, especially with my business side of things. Um, I've gotten huge help on that side. Whereas before I would have been like, no, it's fine. I can do it all by myself when I can't. And I've recently hired a new coach, which I'm so excited to bring in. But for ages, I was so nervous because I was like, oh, I don't know, will they see my vision? And, I have this, it's a micromanaging thing of like making sure that every single client that I have is okay. And, if I'm not coaching them, they mightn't be okay. When in reality, that's not sustainable. What happens if I need to get my wisdom tooth out and then I need to go to the doctors? And that's exactly what happened. I got my wisdom tooth out 3 weeks ago. I had to check in with all my clients because no one else was going to do it for me. Whereas if I had someone who was working with me or alongside me, which I will have now, thank God, I can just delegate, and it makes it much easier for everyone, and it ends up being a better service as a result. So I think it's really important with self-sabotage to recognize where you are self-sabotaging, whether that's negative self-talk, limiting beliefs, fear of failure, fear of success. I think that's a really interesting one. You're almost scared to either post the thing or to go after the job or the promotion or whatever it is, because you know what you actually bring to the table, and you know that maybe success could change things, or it could change how other people perceive you. I think that was another one that I'm really struggling with currently is, I'm moving more into the business side of things and helping people in business and startups and giving advice on that, and moving more into consulting, you could say, with that. And it's very frightening to post content on that when people know you as the person who set up their business in a horse shed with shit on the walls and a hay bale beside an exercise bike. Talk about coming from like humble beginnings. And it's this fear that, who does she think she is, helping people start their own businesses? Or who does she think she is posting about business content when she's only been in business 4 years? And that's kind of the negative self-talk that's going around in my head. But the reality is that I'm not trying to be anyone else. I'm not trying to say that I'm the best person in business. I'm not trying to say that I'm the best person to go to with advice, but I know what I know, and I have built two businesses and they're both very successful, and I know I have a lot to give, and I know what I bring to the table, and I have mentored a lot of people and helped them build their own successful businesses. So I have that confidence in knowing what I bring to the table. And, I it's a really interesting thing, but the only people who will judge you are the people who are below you. The people who are above you, who have been in business for years and who are experts at consulting or who are experts in business or entrepreneurship, will never ever look down on you for starting. It's kind of the same when I'm working with coaches or people who are just starting. Like, I think they're absolutely incredible, which they are, because they're starting something and they're starting it scared and they're doing it anyway, and they don't know the ins and outs of things. And that's entrepreneurship. You just don't. It's this constant uncertainty. Someone said before, it's like a crash course in self-care and like character building. And I couldn't agree more. And they don't know, but you have to start to get better. Like, that quote rings rent free in my head. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And everyone starts somewhere. It doesn't matter what job you're starting out in, what route you want to take, whether you want to, go into teaching from business, or whether you want to go from coaching to business, or whatever it is you want to switch to. no one above you is ever going to judge you, and it's only the people who are below you who are going to judge you. And oftentimes we think so much of ourselves as well, like it's an ego thing, but we think that the whole world is revolved around us, and that this fear of judgment is the thing that stops us from posting, or it stops us from going after the thing that we want out of fear of failing or fear of judgment. And the reality is, like, yes, someone may talk about you for like 2 or 3 seconds, or it could be a minute in their day and then they forget about it, or else they don't talk about you at all. Like, we really don't. We really think that the world revolves around us. That's just an ego thing. It's part of being human. But in reality, no one really actually cares. So you may as well just do the thing anyway. And I just wanted to go down through then how to overcome self sabotage. So again, there is a couple of ways that I mentioned there where I used to self sabotage and also still do. Um, Again, just to go down through them: procrastination, putting off tasks out of fear, anxiety, or overwhelm. I chat about this all of the time with my clients, my mentorship clients, and my coaching clients in Run. Usually, if you feel overwhelmed, it's a lack of inaction. So oftentimes I know when I feel overwhelmed, it's because I am not actioning things enough. And sometimes you can go into like that state of just like, I literally cannot do anything. Like, I'm like frozen. But usually just something is better than nothing. So if, let's say, you have a run on the cards, a big long run on the cards because you're marathon training or half marathon training, and you just feel like you just are procrastinating it, you're like, I just can't do it. Like, I physically just can't get myself out to do it. Something is better than nothing. So tell yourself you're going to go for 1 minute of a jog or 2 minutes of a jog. And if you get 5 minutes of a jog in over the run itself, that's better than nothing at all. Another example would be, for me, would be like posting consistently on social media. I think for me, it has become a default at this point, which is great. But that's also another thing I need to delegate out. But that's something that I know, if I just do something, if I just post something, it reduces that overwhelm. And it doesn't matter how good it is. Like I said, some days it can be 100%, it can be amazing. And other days it might just be 50% or 30%, could be your 100% on that given day, and that's enough. Negative self talk, telling yourself I'm not good enough or I always fail. I feel like this is something that is really loud in my head at the minute because I am leveling up. So I'm leveling up in all areas of my life, in the podcast production, in how it's going. Like, it's in a big studio now. Before, it was just felt really safe because I was behind my laptop and it was over Zoom. Whereas now it's in a studio and it's a big production and it's scary, it's scary. And sometimes I'm like, who am I to have this big production? Or I'm not good enough to be in the top 1% of podcasters. Why am I even bothering? I may as well just give up now. All of this negative self-talk, when it's not true. Like, I absolutely adore the podcast and I love helping people and I love giving advice, and I feel like I have a lot to give all of the time. And if I had a podcast like this when I was growing up, or someone to look up to who is only my age, running two businesses, who failed business in school, I'd be like, wow, that's so cool because I'm failing business in school. So I'm going to listen to her. So you do have something to give, and you shouldn't not do the thing just because you're scared. With negative self-talk, I think it's like trying to observe the thoughts that are going on in your head and choosing how you want to respond. Meditation helped massively for me in gathering my thoughts and getting a hold of my thoughts. Sometimes they can be very ruminating and it can be very loud. And just in those moments, it's trying your best to observe them instead of reacting to them and reframing them. So, for example, if it was like, I'm not good enough, I'm lazy, I'm not healthy enough, I'm not fit enough to be a runner, I'm not a runner is a huge one we see all of the time in our coaching. And the thing is that you are, but it's easier to hide behind that identity that you've told yourself because that's your comfort zone. So it's easier to say that you're not a runner because that gives you the excuse not to run. It would be easier for me to say I'm not a podcaster to hide behind that, and in the fear of failing. And it's not true. I am a podcaster. Okay, I'm not Stephen Bartlett just yet or Chris Williamson, but I will get there over time. Once you put in the reps, I will get there. Absolutely. It's literally just time and reps and input. And that's how you build your confidence. Okay. So if you say to yourself that you're always going to fail or that you're not good enough or that you can't do the thing, that's how it's going to manifest. So I think it's really important that you are able to hold space for your thoughts and that you get tools where you're able to observe them and respond in a more positive way or reframe or just not respond at all. Sometimes I'll just observe the thoughts and just be like, that's really not helpful for me today. I'm just going to let it dissipate. And that takes a long time. I did a lot of CBT work and I also did a lot of meditation to help with that, and meditation for me was really difficult because I just felt like my thoughts were going a million miles a minute. And I was like, this is pointless. I can't do it. Like my brain just never stops. But that's more of a reason to do it because, it's that's the whole point is to be able to try your best to observe the thoughts and quieten them as opposed to constantly being in a narrative with them, because you're not your thoughts. And it's important that the thoughts that are in your head are positive ones. And the way I always say to my clients is, would you speak to a friend in that way? No. So why do you think it's okay to speak that way to yourself? It's not. You develop this self-respect for yourself where you're like, it's actually not okay for me to speak to myself in that way. And I'm choosing not to listen to those thoughts today. For example, me even coming in here today, I just felt like with this solo episode, I'm like, oh my God, like what if people don't want to listen, blah, 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 all of this stuff. And it's just, you have to understand that like that's not you. Like that's when you're doing something that's completely outside your comfort zone. Those thoughts get super, super, super loud because remember, they're trying to pull you back to where you're familiar and what's safe to you. And what's safe to me is doing the podcast behind a laptop where no one can see me. But that's not what I want to do. I want it to be bigger. So that forces us to be outside our comfort zone. It forces us to do something that's outside our comfort zone. And it's scary, but you can still do it scared. You can do the thing scared and you can do the thing while you have all of that negative self talk. And guess what? By doing more action and doing the thing that you really, really want to do, despite the negative self talk, despite the fear of failure, despite the fear of judgment, it quietens that voice. The voice just gets quieter and you get more confident doing the thing. Another one is quitting too early, giving up just before real progress begins due to fear or doubt. And if you watch the YouTube BTs of this first podcast episode of, say, the first guest that I brought on for One Day or Day One, I'm just riddled in fear and negative self-talk and being like, just quit. And I was actually chatting to Kubi about that on the podcast that we did together. And she calls it the little demons that sit on your shoulder telling you every reason not to do it. It's not a reason not to do the thing. They're just pulling you back to what they think is safe for you to keep you safe because that's what's familiar. But actually, you know, you don't, if you stay there, that's where you're always going to stay. So usually if you're somewhere where you feel really outside your comfort zone and you feel a lot of discomfort, that's a good sign because it shows growth and that's where your confidence comes from. So how to overcome self-sabotage: increase your self-awareness, track your habits, triggers and emotional reactions to things. And this is something that I've definitely gotten way better at. Like I'm very, very self-aware and I know where I need help. Like there's a lot of places where I do need help and I do need to get better at asking. And I actually have. I have gotten a lot better at asking now. and just leaning on people more. Whereas before I used to feel like I'm being a burden, or that came from like a people pleasing thing where I was like, oh God, like I don't want to like burden that person, or, everyone has enough going on of their own, and I don't want to. It's kind of that thing of like not wanting to bother anyone, of people pleasing, but just reaching out to whoever it is you need, whether it's a fitness coach, whether it is a business mentor, whether it is a therapist, whether it is a nutritionist, dietitian, whoever it is, or even sometimes it's just a friend, like reaching out to a friend or family member. I know, especially for a lot of men maybe listening, there's a huge stigma around men's mental health and, not being able to reach out. So even if you pluck up the courage to be able to reach out to a friend or a family member, or even if you're not at that point just yet, journaling is absolutely amazing. It says a lot about me. I would say I filled about 15 journals from when I was like, God, from when I was a young age. I always loved writing. I'm obsessed with English, and I always loved writing. And yeah, I'd say I filled about 15 journals. So I never had an issue expressing myself through journals. I actually even remember journaling when I was in fourth class. So I would have been, God, like 7 or 8 years old, maybe a bit older, 9. So yeah, journaling is amazing. Challenge your negative thoughts. Replace with I can't with I'm learning, or I'm making progress, or I'm doing my best. It's so easy to be so hard on ourselves when we self sabotage, because it is a default coping mechanism. And our behaviors and patterns and triggers are so deep rooted that it's so hard to rewire them. So just be easy on yourself and be kind to yourself, and just hold space for yourself when you are trying your best to notice your triggers, break your patterns, and overcome those limiting beliefs, because it's a long road and it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's difficult. So just be kind to yourself on that journey. You're never going to be perfect. You're only human. And like to this day, there's still lots of behaviors that I've worked so hard on, and lots of patterns that I've worked so hard on to break, that still from time to time they pop up. And I've just gotten better at responding and being more kind and compassionate to myself when that does happen. Okay. So practicing self compassion was the next thing. Set realistic expectations. So progress beats perfection. Be flexible and forgiving. This is something that I struggle a lot with. I have like these enormous expectations of myself. And then when I don't live up to them, I'm very sad. And do you know what's actually really bad about that is you will constantly be chasing. You will be constantly in pursuit for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And that's where I really, really am trying to work on pulling myself back, because for so many years I dreamed of having my own business and, working for myself online. And that turned into something bigger than I could have ever imagined, with the Run Club, and having the Run Club in Ireland, in Dubai, in Sydney. Like if you had told me that 4 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. And to think that we went to LA, and, now that I'm living in Dubai, and, my business is here and I have lots of friends here, and all of these things are beyond my wildest dreams. And sometimes I forget that in the constant pursuit for more and achieving more and going after the next goal and the next thing. And it's actually so important to just be where your feet are, and to be proud of yourself for how far you have come, and to recognize all of that. Because if you don't, what's the point? You're just going to be forever chasing, and it actually can cause a lot of unhappiness if you're forever chasing these things, because what's happening is you're missing out on life as it's happening. And it's a scary thought to think like, oh my God, you know, imagine like not sitting in it and just enjoying the journey as you're going, because it's passing anyway. The time is passing anyway. So you may as well just enjoy it a little bit more, because it's kind of that thing of I'll be happy when I get this. I'll be happy when I move here. I'll be happy when I reach this goal. I'll be happy when I get to that goal. And that's something where I really had to sit down with myself with, because I always said I'd be happy when I run my first marathon, or, and then it ended up being my second one. And then it ended up going to LA, which is something I always dreamed of. And then it was like, oh my God, I'll be so amazed when I bring my run club to LA. And it was truly a dream come true. And I think it's just knowing that that's okay and that's enough. Like, I just have to get used to sitting back for a bit and just being like, you are enough just as you are. You don't have to constantly be chasing goals or external validation or doing these huge things to be enough. And that's really important for anyone else listening as well. You're so much more than your job, than your hobby, than, the friends you surround yourself by, than whatever it is. Like, you're so much more than all of these things. You're enough just as you are by yourself. And I know a lot of people attach themselves to certain identities, whether that is the gym goer or the fit one, or the perfectionist or the organized one, or the really good teacher, or whatever it is. And when you attach yourself to those certain identities, and sometimes you might outgrow them, or else you might feel like they're weighing really heavy on you, you just need to remember that you're so much more than the job title. You're so much more than being just the gym goer, or the runner, or the therapist, or the trainee psychotherapist, or whatever it is you're doing. You're so much more than just that. Whether you're a boxer, a teacher, it doesn't matter. You are just enough by yourself. And that's really, really important to remember, especially when things get heavy, or especially if you feel like you're constantly chasing things, especially nowadays. Like, what's the next goal? I even saw with like a lot of my clients who had just ran half marathons, which is incredible, like an incredible achievement. And they're like, oh my God, Kate, like, what's next? I'm going to do a marathon next, or I'm going to do another half marathon, or another. And I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, was one not enough just for this year? Can you not give yourself a break? And I had to have the same conversation with myself. I did another marathon this year. It was my third within 2 years. And then I was like, oh, how can I do the next one? And I was like, actually, maybe I should just take a minute and just enjoy where I'm at. So that's an important reminder. And it's something I'm always trying to remind myself of and ground myself in. And sometimes it's just three things that you can like use your senses to ground yourself. So in the morning, maybe it's three things you're grateful for. And then if you feel like you're getting too in your head, or you're getting too far ahead with things, it's just trying to use your five senses, your eyes, your ears, your nose, taste, touch, smell, to bring yourself back to like the present moment. I find that very helpful. Seek support, create structure and routines, celebrate small wins, and address root causes. And then three questions to reflect on. What is one area in my life where I feel stuck? And could self sabotage be part of the reason? What specific behaviors or thoughts do I repeat that might be holding me back? And what's one small step I can take this week to act in alignment with what I truly want? So, what are the things that you value? I think writing out a list of your values is really important. If you need help with this, just pop me an email or a message afterwards, and I can send you a PDF that will help you with writing out your values. And what are my goals? And then how can I act in alignment with my values and my goals? Okay. And just on the celebrating small wins, I actually listened to a podcast by Erica on the balance theory. And she said what she does is she keeps a book of her wins. So it's like every week she writes down maybe 2 or 3 wins that she had in that week, big or small. And it just reminds you that, sometimes you can be so hard on yourself and like, oh, I didn't do much this week, or I didn't get much done, and then you start being really hard on yourself and you start self-sabotaging. Whereas if you're writing down 3 small wins every week, it doesn't matter how big or small they are. It's just reminding yourself that you are making progress going forward. I hope you found this podcast useful and helpful. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.